Yeah, so again, specifically from a speech and language therapy point of view, swallowing difficulties are so common after a stroke. Yeah, and that can affect someone's intake, can affect their desire to eat if they're on a modified diet, and and it's not very appetising. That can really affect things. People might be embarrassed if they're kind of a bit messier in terms of like their facial muscles being a bit weaker. People might find eating and drinking more effortful after a stroke as well, which can make them less motivated to do it. And like I say, low mood is something that can affect both ways. Low mood can mean someone might want to eat and drink less, but it also might mean that if they're struggling with their eating and drinking, that can really cause low mood as well. And I know so many of my patients feel like that. Our patients with cognitive difficulties often kind of can lack the cognitive drive to eat as well, and eating and drinking can become quite difficult, especially if they're quite confused.
It is for me because when I had breakfast, they had the list as to what you get, and I thought, oh, Weetabix. So I put 1 Weetabix, and then Kate says, "Don't you want 2?" Oh, didn't know that. I thought you got 1. No, and then the nurse said, "No, you can have 2, Tim." "Oh right, 2 please." Oops. And that was it. I just said, "Right, 2 please." Yeah. And that was it.
Yeah.
But it took a week until somebody said to me, Do you want another one, Tim? 2. And I was thinking, thank God for that. I've got 2. Yeah.
Top his food up because he didn't realise that he could ask for extra food, and he used to have 1 Weetabix. Well, at home we'd have had 2, and he didn't realise till a lot later on that he could get more food. So just being aware of that he could have extra food was just
really
made a big difference, because he used all his energy up eating, and then not enough food to then do the rehab.
Yeah.
Our biggest concerns about nutrition and hydration for the patients are continence and their skin damage. But from a nursing point of view, those are the 2 concerns. The patients who are poorly hydrated and got poor nutrition much more likely to have their skin break down. And because people's mobility is affected by this stroke, then the concerns about pressure damage are quite high, and that's a big issue for us. And certainly the hydration, our biggest concern there would be around managing bladders and bowels. Patients who find it difficult to drink will end up with very concentrated urine, increasing the risk of urinary tract infections for themselves, and difficult bowel management. Having reduced mobility will affect them, and then if their hydration is limited and they've got hard stools in there, very difficult for them to pass, and so it's uncomfortable and difficult to manage. So
I thought I was in a prison, and I think for me my godsend was my iPad, because then I could speak to the outside world, and then when I could go out, I used to do some exercises walking on the corridor. But the only thing was, not many people would say good morning. You'd pass your people in the offices, and they just look at you, and you didn't say good morning, unless I'd say good morning. And I thought, well, why can't you say that, But and then sometimes with getting up in the morning, they got you up so early. I didn't have time to get dressed. I had to go down and to do a breakfast on my own, and I had to do orange juice and then porridge and then this and then that. And I thought, well, I don't know that at home. And then of course I burnt my thumb and that because the microphone, you know, I put in there, and of course his hand doesn't work as well, and I thought that shouldn't have been rushed, and they got me up so early. I didn't have time. I got to go in my night clothes to do me breakfast.
So there's a wide range of difficulties. I think you know, there's an element of mood, and you know, the sort of the engagement that they get when they're eating and drinking. They often do it in their rooms, so you know, because of COVID, they're just sat on their own. They struggle with the physical aspects of eating and drinking, so actually bringing the food to their mouth, bringing the cup to their mouth. It might be that they've got reduced coordination, so you know, it misses their mouth. It might be that they've got an upper limb weakness, so actually, you know, being able to use the knife and fork together they can't do. You know, it might be that they've got swallowing difficulties, so actually they're having a modified diet or thickened fluids, and actually, you know, that can impact in terms of their engagement and wanting to eat and drink, because you know, those meals are less appealing for them. They're you know, they're less attractive. They often don't want to eat and drink, so you know, that's a huge thing for them. In terms of positioning, so you know, making sure that the patient's in a good position. You know, it might be that they struggle to maintain their midline or the middle, and lean to one side, and then that impacts on them being able to use their upper limb, you know, in the activity. Fatigue, so we see a lot of patients that struggle with fatigue, and trying to time them sitting in a chair, which is obviously the ideal position for them to be in when they're eating, with managing their levels of energy is really challenging, and often we find that some patients will be really tired just around the meal time because they've sat out for the morning, and then you know, it comes to lunchtime, one of the most, you know, important meals, and then you know, they're too tired to eat anything, and it's how we manage that. So there's lots really. Communication, so actually communicating their choices and what they want in terms of a meal, and when it gets to them, it might not be what they've asked for. We see patients struggle in terms of cognition, so you know, even kind of down to remembering how to eat and drink. You know, it's something so simple that we take for granted. They might not remember actually how to do that. So there's lots that we see that patients struggle with.
Main things is cutting up the meat, and cutting up anything that needs cutting up, because he just uses a fork, and he hates me having to cut anything up for him. And if we went out as well, he'd always choose an option that previously he wouldn't have chosen, purely because he can eat it without needing any help. So it was all the awareness of what other people were thinking of him was, well, still is important to him.
Yeah.
One afternoon the food menus were there on the windowsill, and somebody came round and said, oh, they need filling in. Now, if I hadn't been there that afternoon, I don't know, Tim couldn't fill them in because it was early. He'd probably only been in a couple of weeks, so he wouldn't have been able to read and fill them in. And he was meant to be on a high protein soft food diet. Well, that, when they told me that's what diet he was on, didn't necessarily tally with what the food options were. And obviously I could fill in what food I knew he liked, but if I hadn't been there, somebody else would have decided what food he wants. And I'm a really fussy eater, so it would have been horrendous for me having food in front of me that I didn't like.
From the acute phase, there's the ability to sit yourself up in bed, use your arms to bring your cutlery to your mouth, knowing where the cutlery is. A lot of our patients have visual impairments, and they might have a glass of water there and they can't see it. To them, that part of the world doesn't exist. For other patients, it might be the types of food that they enjoy simply aren't on the menu. or being made to sort of, well, not made to, but having to sit in a hospital bed and perhaps be slumped to one side because staff are busy and trying to feed yourself when you're halfway down the bed, or sitting in your pyjamas by yourself eating from a tray might just be so different than what you were doing before. And I think that has a massive impact on patients' psychology, how they feel about themselves. Often people are embarrassed if they're dribbling or struggling to swallow food or struggling to pick up. I know a lot of my apraxic patients, if they, say for example, pick up a fork and try and spread the butter on the bread, and they know that something's not right but they can't figure it out, and yet this is a simple thing they should be able to do, has a massive impact on self-esteem and confidence. What has happened to me? Why can't I even just use my cutlery? So sort of coming to terms with that and helping our patients to be able to eat and drink in a more normal way has a massive impact.